Christmas was supposed to be a refuge, a brief reprieve from the quiet loneliness that settled over my house for most of the year. I carefully poured the eggnog, its smooth creaminess catching the flicker of the fireplace light. The scent of pine and cinnamon filled the room, wrapping the evening in a familiar warmth I'd long cherished. But beneath it all, something uneasy rippled, something I could not yet name. Mark was there, as expected, his usual confident swagger replaced by an edge I hadn't seen before. Cassandra watched from his side, her smile sharp and calculating, eyes icy with a hunger that made my gut tighten. They moved like shadows cast from my own fears. As I handed out drinks, their murmurs drifted closer, unwelcome, sharp. Then Mark's voice cracked, breaking the fragile peace, holding up a folded sheet of paper. It was a document I had hidden away, one detailing the $15 million I'd quietly saved. A lifetime of sacrifice wrapped in numbers no one was supposed to see. I felt their eyes burning holes into my secrets. The room chilled instantly. Cassandra's voice sliced through, cold and accusing. "Why keep this from us?" she demanded, hostility veiled thinly by false curiosity. Mark stepped forward, no longer my son but a businessman eyeing assets, saying, "It's time we have control. Dad, you can't decide everything anymore. This belongs to all of us." I raised my hand, attempting to hold back the rising tide of shock and betrayal, but their words kept coming, relentless and blunt. They called me stubborn, selfish, a miser stashing away wealth while they struggled. Cassandra's fingers drummed impatiently on the counter, each tap stoking my growing unease. A cold ache spread through me. This wasn't a family discussion, it was a showdown. Mark, the boy I'd supported through school and set up in a house, was treating me like a hurdle to his ambitions. Their sense of entitlement was glaring. Dependence turned arrogance. I thought to remind them of everything, the nights I worked late, the sacrifices made silently so they could live comfortably. But the words stuck, swallowed by the cold walls that had closed around me. I gathered what composure I had left and nodded, keeping my voice calm even as pain welled inside me. Their demands sharpened, no longer subtle but urgent and forceful. The tension thickened, heavier than any argument I'd known. I excused myself, the bitter taste of rejection coating my throat, the warmth of the holiday stamped out by the harsh glare of greed. Alone in the shadowed hallway, I felt the weight of what was lost. Not just money, but trust, respect, the family I thought we still were. The sanctuary I'd built crumbled beneath the cold stare of betrayal, and I was left standing among the ruins, a man forgotten by his own blood. Sitting alone in the dim glow of my study, the house around me seemed to close in, hollow and silent in the wake of what had unfolded. I grasped the edge of my desk, trying to steady the tempest of thoughts swirling inside me. Memories surged forward unbidden, each one a fragment of a life I had devoted to my family, a testament to sacrifices made with the quiet hope of securing their futures. Yet now those very memories felt twisted, distorted by the sharp sting of betrayal. I went back to the beginning, to the moment Mark was born. I could see him then, so small, so full of fragile promise, his newborn cries echoing through the hospital room. The tenderness of that time had galvanized me, igniting a fierce determination to provide the very best I could, no matter the cost. I remembered the nights I spent poring over banking ledgers long after the world had gone to sleep, the sacrifices that never made it into conversation, meals skipped to save money, stress swallowed to protect their peace. Sending Mark off to college had been one of the biggest investments of my life, not just financially, but emotionally. I had worked overtime, negotiated every rate and fee, scrimped and saved to ensure that he would have no burden but the pursuit of his own ambitions. The pride I felt watching him walk across that stage was immense, and I told myself his success was our family's reward for years of quiet struggle. Little did I suspect that those years of sacrifice would be met not with gratitude, but with cold entitlement. And then came the house, still standing solid and warm on the street I had chosen, the home I had spent weekends repairing and improving, often alone, so that Mark and Cassandra would have a life of comfort and security. I could still recall the crisp autumn afternoons spent on the ladder, fixing a gutter while Maria brought me tea. The nights when the pipes froze and I rose to thaw them, unwilling to wake anyone else from their sleep. The very foundation of that house was built on love and labor, a tangible symbol of all I had done to hold our family together. Yet now it felt like a fortress I was being cast out from. The contrast between those selfless acts and the accusations leveled against me struck like a knife. I remembered the worn shoes I'd patched because the budget would not stretch further, the letters from my doctors I had set aside unread, prioritizing Mark's car repairs instead. Each unspoken hardship was a thread in a tapestry woven for their benefit. Yet now it was unraveling, the colors dimmed and fraying at the edges. It was a bitter truth. My generosity had been a foundation for greed. The memories brought a bitter clarity. The gentle patience I had shown, the quiet forbearance when faced with impatience and criticism, they were met not with respect but with disdain. Patience had been mistaken for weakness. I felt the cold fire of anger rise within me, not the blaze of rage, but a steady, burning resolve that settled deep in my chest, demanding justice rather than revenge. This betrayal went beyond hurt feelings. It was an assault on the very fabric of what I had built. Mark and Cassandra's arrogance was a challenge I was now compelled to meet. I was no stranger to conflict, I reminded myself. My entire career had been built on navigating the complex and often ruthless world of finance. Every risk calculated, every opportunity measured, every move anchored by decades of experience. If there was one thing they had underestimated, it was the man who had quietly mastered power behind the scenes. I began envisioning how to respond, not with loud protests or bitter confrontations, but with the steady, deliberate application of everything I knew. There were debts to examine, assets to protect, vulnerabilities to uncover. The law and finance were instruments I had wielded all my life. Now they would be my weapons. This was no emotional outburst. This was strategic patience in its purest form. Still, I understood the need for caution. This was a family torn, and I had no desire to sever bonds beyond repair. My actions had to be precise, calculated, and composed, laying the groundwork for a reckoning that would restore balance without spilling blood. Justice demanded careful planning, not impulsive retribution. I thought about Maria, too, how she had always urged patience, how she believed families could weather storms with understanding and love. I wished more than anything that she were here to steady me now, to remind me there was honor in restraint. But Maria was gone, and this was my burden to bear alone. I took a long breath, feeling the steady pulse of my own heartbeat, slow, controlled, unyielding. The warmth of Christmas had been replaced by a frost that seeped into my bones. But from that cold, I sensed a new power growing within me, a quiet but unshakable fire. I felt no joy, no immediate relief, only the solemn acknowledgement that my life had shifted irrevocably. The path ahead would be long and arduous, demanding every ounce of patience and intelligence I could summon. But beneath the hurt, beneath the betrayal, a seed of determination had taken root. Whatever came next, I told myself, I would face it as I had every challenge before, with calm, with calculation, and with unwavering resolve. Because in this household, where love had turned to greed and family to foes, justice must be restored, and arrogance punished. The stillness that followed Christmas was thick, as if the air itself had grown heavy with unspoken accusations and shattered dreams. The house, once a sanctuary filled with the warmth of family, now felt like a cage lined with cold walls. It was in this silence that Mark reappeared, a quiet, unwelcome reminder that the battle was far from over. He arrived without warning, crossing the threshold with the weight of confrontation pressing down on him. I was seated at my desk, surrounded by ledgers and notes, the tangible legacy of a lifetime spent building and protecting. His sudden presence was like a storm breaking through the calm. Mark's eyes bore into me, not with the affectionate gaze of a son, but with the sharpness of a man consumed by entitlement and impatience. "You really think you can keep treating me like I'm beneath you?" he demanded, pacing with a restless energy that betrayed his frustration. "It's over, Dad. This family's wealth, your money, it belongs to us now. You don't get to decide everything anymore." I watched him, the boy I had nurtured, transformed into someone I barely recognized. His voice carried not only anger, but a dangerous certainty, as if ownership was something owed rather than granted. My first instinct was a flicker of anger, the urge to retort with words sharp enough to cut through his arrogance. Yet, years of experience had taught me restraint. I knew that in moments like these, impulse was a liability. Instead, I met his gaze with a calmness that unsettled him. Mark's pacing grew more agitated as he circled the room like a predator marking its territory. "You've hidden the truth all this time," he spat. "You play the victim while hoarding control. But you're weak, Dad, weak and alone. Without us, you're nothing. It's time you face that." His words were harsh, but the fire they ignited inside me was not one of rage, but of a cold, calculated resolve. I realized then that sentimentality was a luxury I could no longer afford. This was not a family disagreement. It was an ultimatum from a son who had mistaken love for weakness. The man I had been, patient, generous, willing to sacrifice, was giving way to someone new, a strategist prepared to fight with every tool at his disposal. I took a slow, deliberate breath, feeling the familiar calm of focus wash over me. Anger was a flame that could easily consume, but wisdom shaped it into something far more powerful: patience. The years I had spent navigating the intricate world of finance were now an arsenal. Contracts meticulously crafted, audits conducted with unwavering attention, assets tracked and shielded, these were my weapons hidden in plain sight, ready to be deployed. Mark's attempts to provoke me only hardened my resolve. He tried to rattle the calm I maintained, raising his voice, seeking to bait me into confrontation, but I remained steady. "You mistake patience for weakness and arrogance for strength," I said quietly. "True power lies in understanding the rules and navigating them with cunning." He sneered, dismissing my words with a bitter laugh. "Your rules are outdated. Cassandra and I will take what's ours, with or without your blessing. You're old, outdated, and out of touch." The disrespect stung deeply, touching not only me, but the memory of Maria, whose gentle wisdom had always been a source of strength. I wished she were here to steady me, to remind me of the dignity and restraint. But she was gone, and this burden fell solely on my shoulders. When Mark finally left, slamming the door behind him, a profound silence settled once again. But beneath that silence, a fire was burning, a fire of determination fueled by years of betrayal and unacknowledged sacrifice. I began to piece together a plan, mentally mapping out their financial moves, their debts, their secrets hidden behind layers of falsehood. Suspicious transactions, unexplained cash flows, shadowy creditors, all threads in a tapestry waiting to be unraveled. This was no reckless vengeance. It was justice dressed in the cloak of patience and precision. I would dismantle their ambitions quietly, methodically, ensuring every move was legal, every strike unassailable. The law and finance were tools I knew well, and I would wield them like a master craftsman. That night, as the house grew dark and silent, I felt an ember of an old fire reignite. The patience that once felt like submission was now my greatest weapon. No longer a victim, I was becoming the architect of their downfall. The battlefield was set. not with noise or violence, but with intellect, experience, and unwavering resolve. The path ahead was clear. I would face it as I always had, with calm, calculated action and the quiet strength of a man who had endured and learned. Because in this house, where love had turned to greed and family to foes, justice must be restored, and arrogance punished. The days stretched on with a quiet intensity, a calculated rhythm that pulsed beneath the familiar hum of the house. Each morning, I sat at my desk poring over scattered documents, bank statements, contracts, legal briefs. Each one a piece of the intricate puzzle I was unraveling. The air around me was thick with resolve, charged with a sense of purpose that had replaced the wrenching betrayal I had once felt. Mark and Cassandra's finances revealed a tangled web of deception. Cassandra's extravagant lifestyle was funded by money that no legitimate income could possibly justify. I uncovered credit card statements with charges for luxury items, fine jewelry purchased from hidden boutiques, the latest electronics shipped to anonymous addresses, garments from designers whose names whispered wealth and excess. Their joint bank accounts swelled and contracted in suspicious patterns, with funds shuttled between accounts to obfuscate the true trail. Many transfers passed through shell corporations I had barely heard of, their names faint ghosts in my financial memory. Their debts were no less intricate. Payday loans stacked high with usurious interest rates, unpaid bills banked up in silence, tax debts hidden beneath layers of false paperwork. These financial fissures formed a fragile foundation on which they had built a facade of success and entitlement. Cassandra's careless extravagance and Mark's overconfidence had created vulnerabilities I was determined to exploit. To navigate this complex battlefield, I called upon old alliances, trusted lawyers and financial advisors who had once been my comrades in the trenches of banking warfare. Their guidance was invaluable, constantly reminding me to ground every decision in legality and prudence. Emotions, no matter how fierce, could not cloud judgment. Every move had to be airtight, defensible, and resolute. Together, we revisited the estate plans I had drafted with Maria in a time of hope and harmony. They contained hidden protections and contingencies I had long neglected, trusting in the strength of family. There were clauses allowing me to regain control of assets and revoke powers of attorney, legal instruments lying dormant until now. These provisions became my armory. I began the subtle work of shielding assets. With meticulous care, I froze accounts that funded their lavish lifestyle. Credit cards, car payments, even the mortgage on their home ceased to draw funds. Automatic payments were silently redirected or halted. Financial institutions were alerted to watch for erratic activity in their names, warning signs that would prompt immediate action. All the while, I maintained an illusion of normalcy, orchestrating a quiet siege without raising alarm. My next target was their mounting debts, particularly the payday loans, which were ticking time bombs of financial ruin. I reached out to lenders, presenting evidence of mismanagement and questionable transactions. Their eyes grew wary, interest in lending conditional. Negotiations began behind closed doors, a quiet pressure being applied to the fragile web Mark and Cassandra had spun. Their financial ecosystem was cracking. While I tightened these constraints, I kept a careful eye on their wider network. Cassandra's efforts to embed herself within business circles uncovered layers of questionable alliances. Several associates and advisors, initially trustworthy, were now revealed as extensions of her manipulative reach. Together with my legal team, I discreetly reported suspicious activities to regulatory bodies and financial institutions. This slow-moving but relentless approach ensured their illicit practices would face scrutiny from all directions. Evenings passed with quiet intensity as I refined contingency plans. I envisioned every possible countermove and crafted responses: legal injunctions to halt asset transfers, private investigators to uncover further evidence, security measures to protect myself from intimidation or retaliation. Each step was deliberate, ensuring no opening for error. This campaign was the embodiment of my life's work: knowledge, patience, and unyielding resolve converging into a single, focused blow. Mastery over finance and law was not about brute force, but the art of silent influence, the ability to reshape fortune without a single loud move. The battlefield was invisible but deadly. Throughout this time, Maria's memory was my constant companion. Her steadfast belief in fairness and the power of measured patience inspired me. I vowed not to let her sacrifice be in vain, to honor the promises we made, and the family we once were. Day by day, the web around Mark and Cassandra tightened. Their once impervious veneer showed cracks as their excesses and miscalculations became clear. The slow but irrevocable dismantling began to erode their control. I was no longer a passive victim, but the architect of their unraveling, wielding the full force of every lesson life and career had taught me. As weeks passed, it became evident that their empire was weakening. Their confidence gave way to panic. Whispers of financial strain grew in the shadows. I watched from afar with composure, knowing this was the inevitable consequence of arrogance meeting patient justice. In the house where love had twisted into greed, where loyalty was broken by entitlement, I prepared for the final reckoning. The stage was set, not in confrontation or violence, but in a calculated, deliberate unmasking. Justice would be restored with the precision of a master craftsman, and arrogance punished with unrelenting certainty. The phone call from my old banking contact came late one night, breaking the silence with a tone I had come to recognize as both cautious and urgent. He spoke of unsettling activity in the accounts of Mark and Cassandra, rapid wire transfers made in hurried succession, the opening of new credit lines at a frantic pace, and withdrawals that suggested panic beneath the surface of calculated appearances. The financial institutions, once complacent, were now tightening security, wary of what they were being drawn into. I listened to the details with calm resolve. This was the fruition of months of deliberate, measured action, the slow unraveling of a fragile empire built on deception and entitlement. Each frozen account, each flagged transaction, each denied loan was a stroke in a precise, methodical campaign to dismantle their foundation. Mark and Cassandra's facade of control began to waver. Frantic phone calls to creditors, whispered arguments behind closed doors, desperate attempts to stall payments or secure emergency funds, each was a sign their grip was loosening. Their confidence gave way to growing desperation, and I watched with steady composure as their world began to crumble. The first direct confrontation came unexpectedly. Cassandra burst into my study one afternoon, her face a storm of fury and fear. The indignant flush and narrowed eyes betrayed a woman fighting to maintain control as panic flickered behind her commanding facade. She demanded answers, pleaded for mercy, insisted family loyalty should override the assault she and Mark felt was being waged against them. I met her rage with an unwavering calm. I reminded her that accountability was not an option but a necessity, that wealth built on lies was no shield against truth and justice. Her anger was a tempest, but beneath it lay a fragile ember extinguishing under the cold weight of consequence. Mark was no less volatile when he confronted me. His words were sharp, accusations flying like arrows aimed to destabilize and provoke. He painted me as weak, out of touch, unwilling to see the world as it truly was. But his efforts fell flat against the fortress of composure I had built over years of turbulent negotiations and ruthless boardroom battles. His bluster was a mere echo in the face of my disciplined resolve. With their desperation mounting, I intensified my efforts to involve formal institutions. I submitted detailed evidence to regulators and financial authorities, calling for thorough investigations into the irregularities I had uncovered. These wheels creaked to life, bringing external scrutiny to the cracks in their fraudulent empire. Behind the scenes, I prepared for any retaliation. Legal injunctions were ready to block any unauthorized asset transfers. Private investigators and security consultants were mobilized to safeguard me against threats or intimidation. Every contingency was planned meticulously, anticipating every possible move they might make. From a distance, I observed their slow and painful unraveling. The change was subtle but stark. Apprehensive looks replaced confident smirks. Whispered conversations replaced boasting, and the once lively household fell under a heavy cloud of tension and fear. The laughter that had once filled the halls was silenced by quiet desperation. My world contracted to this mission. Each evening, under the steady glow of the desk lamp, I immersed myself in financial reports, legal documents, and strategic planning. The support of trusted old friends and advisors bolstered my resolve whenever fatigue threatened to take hold. The light at my desk became a beacon of endurance and determination. In moments of reflection, Maria's memory was a quiet anchor. Her steadfast belief in fairness and the power of patience inspired every move I made. I refused to let her sacrifices be rendered meaningless by betrayal and greed. Their recklessness escalated as panic drove them to rash decisions. I learned Mark attempted to leverage the family home as collateral for a dubious loan without my consent, a move both illegal and desperate. I acted swiftly, instructing my attorneys to file injunctions preventing any such unauthorized transactions, cutting off their desperate escape routes. Throughout this ordeal, I remained a pillar of calm, neither broken nor enraged. The mantle of measured authority, navigating the battle in shadows and statutes rather than in clamor or violence. The invisible war I waged was far more potent than any open confrontation. Weeks passed, and the fortress Mark and Cassandra had built around themselves crumbled under the steady pressure. Financial institutions began to withdraw their support. Business contacts distanced themselves. Their standing eroded, leaving them isolated and exposed. In the unfolding tale of retribution, I transformed from a man betrayed to an instrument of justice, restoring order through tactical intelligence and relentless persistence. Personal pain had become a broader quest for fairness and dignity. The pieces were now in place for the final moves. I stood poised not as a victim but as the master of my fate, ready to deliver justice not through fury but through the unshakable power of patience, knowledge, and precise execution. The morning of the family hearing arrived with a chilly haze that clung to the city streets, softening the edges of the world outside but doing nothing to dull the sharp focus I carried within. The courthouse loomed ahead, a grand, unyielding edifice of stone and glass, indifferent to the personal battles unfolding within its walls. As I passed through its heavy doors, the weight of those quiet months of preparation settled squarely on my shoulders, mingling with a calm resolve that had grown deep and unshakable. Inside, the courtroom was a stark chamber, bathed in pale light and marked by the quiet steam of anticipation. The rows of seats were sparsely filled with family, legal counsel, and a smattering of observers whose interest ranged from compassion to cold curiosity. Mark and Cassandra sat side by side, their faces shadows of the confident arrogance that once filled the room. Layers of tension and fear flickered in their eyes, betraying the thin veil concealing their unraveling world. The judge, an austere figure who commanded the room's attention without raising her voice, surveyed the assembled with a measured gaze. Her presence was a stark reminder that this moment was not merely about family disputes, but about the solemn administration of justice. When called forward, I rose with measured steps, letting the years of endurance and strategic patience carry me steadily through the room. I brought with me not only papers and evidence, but the weight of sacrifices, those quiet nights spent working to secure a future for the family I now found fractured and betrayed. I began with the facts, laying each out with clarity and precision. Fraudulent debts cloaked in the guise of legitimate loans, inflated figures engineered to disguise insolvency, signatures forged to manipulate outcomes. My words carved through the courtroom's atmosphere like a scalpel. They traced the path of funds diverted through an elaborate network of shell companies, financial maneuverings designed to siphon wealth undetected. Documents I presented illuminated discrepancies with unmistakable clarity. Expenditure far outpacing declared incomes. Transactions routed through accounts that legally bore no connection to the parties involved. Each page was a testament to a systematic betrayal not only of law but of family. Mark and Cassandra shifted uneasily as the facade they had so carefully maintained crumbled before the unblinking light of truth. Their composure faltered, shadows flickering across their faces as pieces of their deception were methodically dismantled. The air thickened, the quiet murmurs of realization rippled through observers. Witness testimony supplemented the paper trail, providing first-hand accounts and expert analysis that underscored the magnitude of their fraud. Each piece of evidence knitted together a tapestry of deceit, illustrating a concerted effort to game a system built on trust and integrity. Throughout my presentation, I spoke with a voice steady and devoid of bitterness. This wasn't a man seeking vengeance, but someone dedicated to restoring balance and honoring the principles Maria had instilled in me: justice, patience, and measured strength. As I spoke, I glanced briefly at the judge, whose expression remained unreadable but attentive. The courtroom seemed suspended in time as the gravity of the revelations settled over all present. This was no longer a private matter. It was a public reckoning. When the final words were spoken and the evidence laid bare, the judge addressed the court with measured authority. She articulated the verdict with precision. Mark and Cassandra's claims to the family fortune were invalidated. Assets would be frozen and redistributed under court supervision. Control of the estate would be restored to rightful stewardship. Penalties were imposed to compel restitution and deter future malfeasance. The courtroom echoed with the quiet weight of the decision. Mark and Cassandra's downfall was not marked by cries of defeat, but by the silence of inevitable consequence. Their empire, once projected as unassailable, lay exposed and dismantled. Walking from the courtroom, the crisp air greeted me like the promise of renewal. The battle, long waged in the shadows, had reached a public resolution. Though wounds remained, the foundation of justice had been laid. In the weeks that followed, news spread discreetly among community circles. The reputations of those once admired were shattered upon the harsh scrutiny of truth. Family gatherings bore the marks of fractures deepened by greed, but softened by the hope of eventual mending. As I navigated the aftermath, I reflected deeply on the path ahead. The house, the memories, and the family I had known bore both scars and strength. Healing would require time, humility, and renewed commitment to the values Maria and I held sacred. Her memory was a quiet flame that guided me, reminding me always of the power of patience and the importance of integrity. In honoring her, I found the strength to rebuild, not just possessions, but trust and dignity. In reclaiming what was justly mine, I reaffirmed the foundations upon which our family had been built: sacrifice, steadfastness, and love. The justice rendered was not a weapon, but a restoration, calm, deliberate, and resolute. Though the journey had been arduous and marked with pain, it was the embodiment of endurance and quiet triumph. In the delicate balance between strength and mercy, I stood renewed, ready to shape a future grounded in truth and guarded by wisdom. Justice had been fulfilled, arrogance humbled, and in this restored order, I found the strength to move forward, steady and unbroken. The house felt different now, quieter, yes, but not empty. The stillness carried with it the weight of what had been lost and the fragile promise of what might be restored. Walking through familiar rooms, I traced memories like worn paths. The echo of laughter that once filled the halls. The moments of warmth shared over decades, now tinged with the sting of betrayal. Yet beneath the silence, a quiet strength took root within me. A steady flame forged through patience, endurance, and the pursuit of justice. Each corner of this home whispered stories of sacrifice and steadfast love, reminders of Maria's unwavering faith and of the life we had endeavored to build. Her presence lingered in the soft light falling through the windows, in the photographs preserving smiles from years past. It was her quiet strength, her belief in the power of patience and integrity that had been my compass through the darkest trials. Though the scars left by Mark and Cassandra's greed ran deep, I held on to the belief that healing was possible. The fractures in family could be mended with humility, time, and honest effort. Reconciliation would not come overnight, nor would it be easy. But the hope for restoration glimmered faintly beneath the weight of what had transpired. News of the court's decision filtered through the community with hushed tones, shifting the tides of perception. Those who once admired Mark and Cassandra's facade of success now faced the sober truth of downfall. Social circles reeled as reputations crumbled under the harsh light of reality, and family gatherings shifted in tone, carrying shadows but also an unspoken desire to rebuild bonds fractured by greed. Inwardly, I felt an overwhelming sense of responsibility, not only to protect what was rightfully mine, but to uphold the values Maria and I had cherished. Sacrifice, steadfastness, and love were more than ideals. They were the foundation upon which we had constructed our lives. In reclaiming control, I reaffirmed these principles, determined that they would guide the path forward. The justice delivered was measured and deliberate, not a weapon of anger, but a restoration of balance. The slow, patient work had culminated in a triumph that transcended mere possession. It was a victory of truth, humility, and enduring strength. Though marked by hardship, this journey had tempered me, revealing resilience that was neither loud nor ostentatious, but profoundly real. I balanced strength with mercy, acknowledging the pain yet embracing the future with hope. Standing amid the quiet steadfastness of my home, I found myself ready to create a future founded on wisdom and integrity, free from the shadows cast by betrayal. Maria's memory remained a beacon, a reminder that even in the aftermath of devastation, light could find its way. The lessons of the past would shape the promise of tomorrow, and I welcomed the challenge to rebuild, not simply stones or dollars, but trust, dignity, and peace. Justice had been fulfilled, arrogance humbled, and within this restored order, I moved forward, steady, unbroken, and at last, truly free.